Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Stand Up for Science. That's me, James. We've got a great afternoon for you. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us. This is going to be a really great session. The goal of this one really is to talk about the relevance of science for driving climate action. And to have that conversation, we've got two of the brightest scientists in Europe joining us here today. So it's a great pleasure to welcome to the stage Valérie Masson-Delmotte and Levke César. Here they come. Welcome. Lovely to see you both. Thank you. Welcome to the greenhouse. It's nice and warm.
It is.
It is.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending your time with us, ladies. You guys are two of the brightest scientists in Europe at the moment. You're actively involved not just driving public science opinion, but also at a policy level, nationally, internationally. There's a lot going on in your offices, and I thought it'd be nice just to start by asking you, take us into a day in your life. What goes on in the office, in the lab, Levke, for you? What happens 9 to 5 or 9 to 10 maybe?
Okay, maybe I start off with we do not have a lab, but I just sit in front of my laptop and my computer and my numbers all day. And I do talk to my team, so that's nice too. And second, thank you for comparing me to Valérie, who has like 20 years plus more experience than I and has actually led the IPCC report and is kind of one of the big names out there. So I'm actually quite humbled by that. And otherwise, yes, my days are spending reading emails, programming, looking at data and discussing, trying to make sense of it, but also reaching out to potential partnerships, whether it's data providers, other research institutions, and kind of come up with new projects on how we can tackle the problems that we have.
And Valérie, for you, like Levke just mentioned, you're in your IPCC panels. There's so much going on in your life. Where do you start?
So at the moment, every day is different, every year is different, and what I like with science is learning, sharing, advancing knowledge. Yeah. That's why we are scientists. So this week we have finished, for instance, a manuscript where we take key indicators of the state of global climate and human influence. We've been doing that for the last 2 years to update the last IPCC report. That manuscript is going to be submitted and probably online in the next days.
Wow.
So that's just putting lots of efforts together to be able to provide a regular update to the state of global climate and human influence, with the hope that in the future we'll track progress rather than tracking continuous increase in greenhouse gas emissions and fast warming. So that's what I'm doing with the team, updating the last IPCC reports. Another dimension is my own research focusing on novel measurements in Antarctica, looking at the transport of moisture towards Antarctica, looking at places where it's very hard to have these measurements. And they matter because what's happening in Antarctica doesn't stay there. And it matters for things like sea level rise through the response of the Antarctica ice sheet. And starting this year, beginning of 2025, I thought most of my time would be allocated to that research project. We've done also an outlook in France for polar research, preparing the next international polar year. But after January 20, after the new decisions from the Trump administration, and in particular unprecedented attacks on sustainability and climate sciences, I've also allocated a lot of time to share what I learned from my US colleagues, but also colleagues from Argentina, colleagues from the Netherlands, about undermining climate science. Yeah. And so I'm also here to speak for Stand Up for Science and the initiative that was launched by many French colleagues to share with society at large what is happening, why it matters, why science is a common good, and why it plays a key role in our democracies.
Yeah, well done. What a woman. You mentioned something I was going to come on to a bit later on, but with what's going on in America, let's just go straight in. How hard has that made things like the IPCC report and your daily jobs, our planet's life in the last couple of months? Take us into those meetings. Like, what's the mood?
So I'm no more involved in IPCC as a co-chair, but I'm closely following what was happening recently. So you must be aware that for the current assessment of the IPCC, there's work underway for a special report on cities and climate change that's being prepared for 2027. But for the rest, for the other main reports, their outlines have been agreed. Authors are being selected, but there's still no consensus from governments on the timeline. And that's also an unprecedented threat for the role of the state of knowledge to inform decision making. In the past, IPCC reports were available before, for instance, the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement. The pressure at the moment from some governments is to phase out the delivery of IPCC reports from the second global stocktake of the Paris Agreement, which is a major threat for the relevance of the state of knowledge to inform international negotiations. For the first time, the US government played the empty seat within the last IPCC plenary session, and also the co-chair of the IPCC group on greenhouse gas emission reductions, who was the chief scientist at NASA, was asked to not be a chief scientist at NASA anymore, and her support team was dismantled. So we can see unprecedented attacks also on one part of science diplomacy, which is all governments agreeing to support an assessment of the state of knowledge as a shared understanding basis to inform international relationships. So this is what I wanted to share on that matter.
Wow. Well, Levke, let's come back to you for this one. So this panel is a little bit about how the science that you're doing drives climate action. So how does science help shape what we can do out there? How does the research that you're working on impact in real time?
Well, I guess there's an ideally in how it really works.
So ideally,
scientists would discover something that is important for all of us, and then politicians would act upon it. And if it's okay, I would actually like to share a very short story on, can I maybe get slide 1 up? I'm sorry, I'm a scientist, so no, that's slide 2, I need slide 1. Yeah, perfect. And I'm making a mess, also as a theoretical scientist. So you probably know the ozone hole and the ozone layer story. If not, ozone, that's basically the oxygen-3 molecules in the upper atmosphere that is kind of acting like the sunglasses of the whole Earth. It's protecting your skin and your eyes from the harmful radical UVB radiation. And this red line is showing the concentration of ozone over Antarctica. And in the 60s, 70s, we started using more and more harmful chemicals for refrigerators and spray cans and so on that were harming, depleting the ozone layer. Scientists saw that right away and published this. There's a paper by Molina and Rowland in 1974 saying, hey guys, what you're doing isn't great, and in the future it's going to cause a lot of problems, and asked politicians to act. Quickly afterwards, and you can see that quote here in the lower corner, one of the chairmen of one of the bigger CFCs, so one of those basically harmful pollutants companies, said, yeah, that's science fiction, it's complete nonsense, and this is actually one of the harmless quotes. So there was actually a lot of shit against those scientists. They didn't give up. They kind of said, no, this is what we see. This is the truth. It's not what we want. It's what we see. It's in the data. And luckily, a few years later, then the Montreal Protocol in 1987 was passed, and those chemicals were forbidden to use. And you can see in the red line, the ozone layer has recovered since then. It's definitely not up to it was. It's still fairly low, but it has recovered. And the red arrow shows what it could have been if the scientists hadn't pursued with saying, hey, we have to stop this. And what we avoided, and we can show that with science nowadays, is millions of additional cases of skin cancer, of cataracts that is eye harmful, and death. And that's ideally how science works without the science fiction nonsense quotes, so we could do without those. Scientists make you aware of a problem, and we find together a solution.
And the real version?
The real version is that there's often a big gap between what science says and what politicians and business makers do, likely because science is not focused on the short term but on the long term. I mean, we talk often when it comes to climate change, years, decades, sometimes even centuries or millennia. And most of politicians think in, I guess, the voting periods, which is 3 to 5 years. And that, of course, is a big problem.
There is an irony in it, how hot it is up here as you're showing a slide about I feel like we're in the ozone layer right now. Valérie, I want to talk about something that you're particularly passionate about, and that's the link between democracy and climate change. Can you talk a bit about what you've noticed and where those parallels lie?
I would like to start by acknowledging the strength of US climate science that has been a world leader since the Second World War, at the forefront of advancing our understanding of human activities affecting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, pioneers in global climate modeling, understanding the role of the ocean, and the first report on understanding human-caused climate change was a report from the US Academy of Sciences in 1979. All the bases were there. Understanding has only advanced, but all the key pillars of understanding how the climate system works, how we are interfering, and the risks was already there. And in the 1980s, when the IPCC was created, at the same time you had some companies in the US, some think tanks, some individuals who thought that they had to have a special role, and the role was not, to take these facts as scientific facts and develop solutions. The role was to create a smoke screen. A smoke screen meaning to create disinformation, to spread doubt towards the media, towards policymakers, towards the general public, so that the science would advance. It would be free, with academic freedom and the rest, but there would be this smoke screen in between the general public and climate action. So that undermines public deliberations, it undermines democracy. And more broadly, what we see is that already, compared to what could have happened without climate action, public policies, technological advances have allowed to avoid 4 to 8 billion tons of greenhouse gases emitted every year.
Wow.
We see climate action, and there has been one paper looking at what works, 1,500 climate policies in 50-something countries. And what is striking is these policies have been advanced most in countries with the highest quality of democratic life. So the more democratic a country is, the more effective it is in environmental protection, reducing greenhouse gases, and the outcome is we see that in France and 24 different countries, greenhouse gas emissions have decreased for more than a decade and in a structural way, not just economic crisis on the short term. So what we see from an analysis of public policies is that a better quality of democracy, a better understanding of fundamental human rights, a better role of the civil society, freedom of press, leads to a better outcome in terms of climate action.
Yeah.
And what is at play now is that because it is possible to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to phase out fossil fuels, we have an understanding of what works, what can be scaled up, accelerated. Because the scientific facts are so strong, obstruction to climate action takes a new form now, so that it's not just undermining the solutions that work, like energy efficiency or clean technologies. It's undermining the production of scientific knowledge and the availability of data, public information. In the US, it's really striking. The two main challenges for democracies to tackle climate change, the two biggest threats, are the role, the dependency on fossil fuels, which have been shown to play a corruptive role at multiple levels, and when even there's ambitious climate action goal, it undermines the implementation. And the second biggest threat are societies with huge income inequalities, where there's a disproportionate influence of those who have highly emitting lifestyles, who have this disproportionate influence in democracy, sometimes just because they own the media or the social media. And so we can see that, in fact, we have the same threats for democracy and for climate action through these different roles, where disinformation, populism are both threats for democratic life and threats for climate action at the same time.
Yeah. Well said, Valérie. Levke, Valérie touched on a few things that I wanted to put to you as well, and that's the role perhaps the media plays in the communication of science. I guess it's sort of two questions. Does science have to be better at communicating? And secondly, how does it do that in a world of disinformation, not just necessarily in the wider media, but even between different scientists? Sometimes there are disagreements or there are quotes that are taken out of context. How do you kind of combat that?
Oh, that's difficult because there are quite a few answers to that question. So on the one hand side, I guess, yes, science or scientists would benefit from communicating better, but also journalists would, I guess, benefit from trying to accommodate the scientists a little bit more, in the sense of, I often had it, for example, before interviews, that I asked journalists, hey, can you give me the questions that you want to ask me? And they were like, no, then you can prepare for it. I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? I'm a scientist, I want to give you the most updated numbers. It's not you quizzing me like an exam and you grade me then what I know by heart. But it's not that often the case, but it happens. The other thing is, of course, journalists from giving you new headlines. This is big, this is new, and so on, and cool. And this is an argument, this is a disagreement. But actually, scientific consensus works on this is what we've known for quite some time. We can show it again. This is what we agree on. This is kind of more peaceful, actually. And I think because of that, we have a discussion between what scientists say overall and what journalists actually print. So maybe it's coming better directly from the scientist. But then again, I also know how I talk to my common scientist. If I would do that to you, you would probably say, okay, she's kind of a nerd and maybe a little bit of a know-it-all, always correcting stuff. And so I don't know, but maybe we can try to both change a little bit and come closer.
And how do you sort of balance that argument where people say, look, we've got enough science, we know the problems, we know we've identified where those specific problems are, it's time for action. How do you balance the two things? Or can you? Is that a constant battle for people like yourselves?
It is not really. So, I mean, it's absolutely right. It's time for action. It has been time for action for quite a few decades, but we're not doing enough, so it's definitely not a contradiction there. And then there is a lot of stuff that we do not know. It's just how we frame it, right? And the problem is, of course, scientists love uncertainties. It's what we do, right? It's kind of trying to narrow that range of uncertainty and figure out this tiny little detail. And we still have to keep doing that because it's going to make our science better and it might actually help us pop up with some new solutions. What we have to act upon is not those small area of uncertainty, but we have to act upon the big area of consensus. And I think those two things can easily work in parallel if we focus on one or the other, and if we don't use the small area of uncertainty as an excuse not to act on all the things that we know.
Do you have anything to add, Valérie?
Yes, so I think it's also nice to look backwards. So in terms of key indicators of the state of climate, what has happened is close to what was modeled based on physics. So it gives confidence. And then there's a lot of work in our community to establish the fitness for purpose of models, the confidence in projections. We can report that. We can also report what we understand about what could be worst-case scenarios that are plausible. They matter. For instance, for a city like Paris, a key example was coming from a local group of scientists working with local authorities. And the question was, is it possible in Paris to have something like 50 degrees Celsius in one summer day? And the work of the State of Knowledge Now is today it's implausible based on the understanding that we have, all the lines of evidence that we have. But if global warming is reaching 2 degrees by 2050, then it's possible as a rare event, but it's possible. And it's not, the projection where we have the highest confidence, but looking at this tail of possible outlooks, it matters. Because when you think of hospitals with very fragile people, when you think of key infrastructures to store food in good conditions, or for electricity, or for railways, then you think that if you have 50 degrees in Paris, within less than 30 years, these infrastructures need to be resilient, need to be retrofitted so that they work in case you have such an eventuality. Otherwise, it's a disaster. And so that's also how we can interact. We can report the projections where we have the highest confidence, but also the tail of distribution, which matters to be better prepared to inform risk management or adaptation strategies. So it's not communicating confidence and uncertainty, it's understanding what matters for society, what information is useful, how we can provide storylines that are based in physics and can inform decision making. So that's a way we can interact with society. And that's also why in our research federation around Paris, Institut Pierre-Simon Laplace, where we are about 1,000 of scientists, we have set up a center, a climate center for society, because we need to better understand what are the needs from society. We need to better train and offer skills for all scientists, including the young scientists, to interact with society. And we need to advance our own research production towards societal transformation. So we see ourselves not just, as scientists in an ivory tower, but part of societal transformations. We measure, we reduce our own carbon footprint. We want to be part of sustainability sciences and contribute to transformations of society. So that's, a different way of looking at the role of scientists, not just, delivering specific knowledge, but co-producing knowledge with society to address environmental and societal challenges.
Levke, you said something to me. Yeah. Sorry. We were talking before, and you said that sometimes you sort of get told to give us a positive outcome. Give us some good news. How do you can't always do that, but how does that work? Is that what people want, do you think?
That's actually, for me, one of the most challenging things. So when I started getting into science communication a little bit, we at our institute, we actually have a press office, and they kind of tell me, hey, how journalism and so on works and how you reach people is actually by ending on a positive note and give them hope. And that was so tough for me, because I was thinking, how can I give them hope when I know the facts and I know how dire and alarming the situation is? But I'm not allowed to show that. I'm not allowed to get emotional, because then I know there's this great movie now with Jennifer Lawrence, Leonardo DiCaprio, Don't Look Up, and she gets basically called a totally panicking alarmist, and nobody can take her seriously. But honestly, the situation we're looking at right now is quite dire. It's extreme. We are looking at potentially millions of people starving, of death, of people having to be relocated, and so on. And for me, it's hard to then say, smiling and say, hey, but you're here right now and you want to change, right? So everything is great. Looking at the decades before me, I'm a climate scientist, I would say, of the second generation, right? The first one definitely, or the third even. And I see those older scientists, and that's actually another thing that also, I guess, were the first ones learning it, who also were really brave and actually take a lot of the really negative comments, way more than we do right now. It's great to have so much acceptance already for climate science. But basically, they also are still kind of, hey, let's try to be positive and so on. And I actually knew quite a few now that they retired said, well, but realistically, looking what we've done all those years and how much changed, I'm not quite sure whether I'm still that positive. So, there's no point, and I don't want to tell everybody to give up. There's no point in giving up, and honestly, giving up here is also not an option, and we do not have to give up. But staying positive, I guess it's more about connection, actually. And that's actually, for example, also why I'm here today, to bring my message, but also because this is hopeful for me to look into this audience, see so many people who want to change, who do something. I need that, because otherwise I would despair if I just look at my science every day and try to get the message out. And I brought some of the comments you get as a scientist when you give interviews. There's also a group that basically tell you to stop with the bullshit, that say that you are alarmist, occultist, you only do it to keep your job. I could do other things, yeah, but okay. So it is difficult, but it's also why it's great to be here with you guys today.
Speaking of, well done, Levke. Speaking of you guys, we have like 7 or 8 minutes left. If there's any questions from the audience, we have some time to take a couple. The audio in here is not amazing, so I don't know if there's a microphone or something we can give. Or I'll do some running around. Where's our lovely technical ladies? Hello. Oh, there she is. Has anyone got a question for Levke or Valérie? If not, I'll just keep talking to you guys. Oh, right at the back, sir. Oh, that's a bit of a run for right there. She's off. It's on its way. Oh no, she's coming to you. Oh no. It's behind you.
Really fun to watch it from here when two people do not meet and you're like, yeah, no.
Well, like I was at a pantomime then. He's behind you. Hello, sir.
Hello. I have been a scientist. I have been a scientist in my past life and dropped it because I had the feeling it's frustrating to dig more into detail without actually seeing the change happening. Maybe it was my former young me who didn't see how it translates into actual change, but so didn't want to criticize you for doing science because it's amazing. But I turned to filmmaking and storytelling and to communicate the facts and provide human context to the scientific results that you are providing, right? So I wonder how you see that. Should scientists themselves, or maybe in collaboration with people who can translate it into what it actually means for humans, real personal stories, should there be like a movement forward towards doing more that, putting scientific facts into human context?
I think it's, should we be seeing more climate stories on film and TV? And I think that's the kind of question.
Yeah, you want to start?
Yes, we need lots of allies. We need people playing on art and emotions. We need storytelling, so that what we know, what we understand, what we project, the choices we have, different futures depending on our choices, based on our scientific understanding, can be shared broadly. So compared to what you highlighted, there's a sense of urgency, but we must also convey the sense of agency, the capacity to act, and the importance of scientific knowledge or evidence-based decision-making as well. I also think we need support to show why science matters and why science is a public good. That's a core aspect of the Stand Up for Science movement. Why it matters when you have less measurements in the atmosphere and you decrease the quality of weather forecasts. Why it matters when you monitor the ocean so that you have less risk for shipping, where you can better manage fisheries on the long term. Why it matters to continue to invest in climate modeling so that you can have better information to be prepared for future risks. We need lots of stories to be able to convey that. One aspect which is really nice in the US is, for instance, many scientists in the US writing op-eds in local journals, in local communities, so that they can connect their own knowledge, their science, to what matters to people in different contexts. And we need support for that, so that it's not abstract, but it becomes also concrete.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Does anyone else have? We probably have time for a couple more. If anyone else has a question. Oh, there's a couple right here. Thank you. She's on her way. Lady in the second row, I think. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi. Oh gosh, that's loud.
It's loud, isn't it? Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for your time and for being here. You were speaking a bit about, what needs to happen to support scientists. My question is more concretely, what can all of us here do today, tomorrow, moving forward to support scientists to make sure that, democracy doesn't crumble and that science is funded and alive and well?
Democracy's not crumbling, Levke. How do we do it?
Well, I love this question, and please can you show my slide 5, because I actually was hoping for this question. So I put some down notes there, and I guess what's really important is this last statement that you don't have to be a scientist to stand up for science. You just have to care about what is the truth. And that starts really in your everyday life. If you believe something is true, check it from time to time, especially a solution that seems to be too easy, or you're like, okay, I'm looking for, I don't know, a reason why, for example, the glass of wine is actually good for my heart. Of course, if you Google it in a certain way, you might find somebody who's saying, yeah, that's true, but it's probably best when you actually look for the real science that you trust the scientific institutions, the people that have peer-reviewed papers out there. Then call out misinformation when it happens around you. I know that's hard. I have to admit, I don't even do it every time I'm at a family dinner. Sometimes I'm like, okay, no, let's have this Christmas in a peaceful way. And I'm just saying, no, happens. But try to do it as often as possible. And then do stuff like this, where you show us scientists that you are there to support us and that you do not hate us for speaking truths that are inconvenient.
And stand up when you hear that environmental regulation, environmental protection, scientists are being used as black sheep. You need to understand what's happening in the US. Firing people who do monitoring of changes, understanding of changes, understanding social injustice related to the environment. Firing people to do the monitoring of protected species. The purpose is to undermine the cornerstone of environmental protection. No data, no regulation, no environmental protection. So you need to stand up for that. You need to stand up for funding science. Funding science also relies on taxes, on what you pay for that as a company, as a person. It goes with funding. So at the moment, lots of colleagues in the US, in Argentina, in other countries, they need support, and also they need jobs because they have been fired. So opportunities to support them matter. And I suggest to end with a symbol we will send to our US sustainability science colleagues. Would you like yourself now to stand up for science? I do. Thank you.
Woo! Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, to Valérie and to Levke. Thank you so much.